All right, it's time for the September release roundup. I have 13 books to talk about today, and if you don't know, if this is your first time here, I go on BookTube. I consume a lot of reviews about releases that just came out in the previous months, and I put all those links down below. I put timestamps. I give you a Goodreads shelf if you want to go into synopses, because I typically focus more on what people felt about it, some tropes that are present, but not necessarily this is the synopses of the book. So, that's what's going to happen. We pinball between things with the greatest number of ratings to the lowest because I have fun doing it that way. And let's get started with the book with the highest number of ratings, not necessarily the highest rating, and that is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. And this is a book that I have also read. There are so many reviews of this. I highlighted a few down below, some from really annoyed, did not like this, to had a great time, and we're going to talk about that briefly here. But in general, the general trend is that people enjoyed the first third significantly more than the latter half of the book. And that's kind of because the first third is very grounded. It's a very contemporary setting. We're following a high schooler kind of coming into responsibility. He's a pretty likable protagonist, and you get this slice of life with him, this relationship with this old German shepherd and this old man. Honestly, my favorite part too. It's a very cozy time. And the second half is where the portal fantasy kicks in. And that's where we literally have the homage to every fairy tale you can think of under the sun. And there's been mixed results in how people have connected to that. I personally didn't hate it, but I didn't love it that much. That's definitely where this went from being like really engaging 4.5-star experience down to like a 3.5-star experience. And that's generally the case for most people. Like Joanna mentioned it in a mid-month update, had a similar experience. There are some people, though, who really didn't like it. Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative made a short that's pretty funny about it that I have linked down below. Jordan Reeds actually didn't really like Charlie as a character, or the character work specifically. And I can kind of see that because, although I found Charlie to be a likable protagonist, he kind of tries to make you think he's edgy. And, like, maybe he is, but, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you keep telling me that you have this dark past, but you don't tell me what that dark past is. And then the reveal of that is not necessarily, like, this big climactic reveal, if that makes sense. But in general, I thought the character work of the protagonist was pretty well done, but most people, there were a few people who actually really loved the character work of the people in the portal world in the other, but most reviews I saw found them to be pretty one-note fairy tale caricatures. But I do think Edward Lorne really liked the character works of that, and he's a huge Stephen King fan. Like, that's a channel I would point you to if you want someone who's, like, a Stephen King aficionado. In his videos, he, like, has so many Stephen King books behind him. It was impressive. Tall Guy Reads really liked it, but thought the pacing was inconsistent, which is a thing I think anyone who's read this 600-page standalone would agree with. Like, I personally think if it was 400 pages, it would have been potentially like a 4.5, 5-star read for me, because it kind of just got away from itself. And this kind of leads to another general complaint or annoyance that people had if they had stated it, which is that there's a lot of pop culture references. There's a lot of blatant pointing at, oh, this is The Wizard of Oz, or this is something from a Stephen King book. And, you know, sometimes that's immersive and sometimes that's not. It depends on who you are as a reader. I do kind of wish that there was more taking from the fairy tale formula of a story and less from the actual tropes of fairy tales, if that makes sense. I kind of talk about that a little bit in my Nettle and Bone versus fairy tale video. But that's the general gist of it. I personally really loved the audiobook. I thought it was really well done. That's probably why I didn't have a negative experience with the second half, because it was still an engaging time. But there was just a lot in the, like, when the plot pivots at about, like, the 60% mark that I was just like, but I didn't want this plot. I was enjoying the plot we were already in. But that was my experience. It generally seems to be one of those things that most people agree on. Just how much that annoys you or not, or, like, hinders your experience is going to vary. The next one I talk about really doesn't have too many reviews, and that is The Genesis of Misery. I really had to look for some, and I have actually read half of the book at this point. I haven't finished the book, but I've read half of it, so I have, like, a general sense. But this has been pitched as the Joan of Arc in space, and as someone who does not know a lot about Joan of Arc, I can't speak to how accurate this is, but I can point you to Judith's review. Judith did a whole standalone review. Judith does know the story of Joan of Arc, and she said it was more of an inspiration. We definitely have this kind of chosen one character talked to by angels sort of thing, but it's more inspired by it, and it definitely, though, kind of has this own universe religion and how that affects politics and the gameplays in this space opera. And I've been really liking that. That's been reminding me of like the 60s, 70s sci-fi era where we do have this like opulence, very glitzy, glammy space opera, but we have this like religion to explain weird sci-fi. It reminds me a little bit of parts of Dune and Foundation, and especially the like very descriptive writing styles of books in like the 70s and 80s is all in here, but like with a lot of modernization, especially in terms of gender representation, and also just like it's doing its own weird cool thing. Like it's not pulling from like spice from Dune, but it has these really weird stones. But you know, it is one of those works that I think has been difficult, and I'm buddy reading it right now with Jocelyn and Bethany, and Bethany will probably be talking about it for sure by their end of the month wrap up, so if I remember when we get into November to put her link down below, I will, because she's having a really great time with it. So if you want someone who's been like really connecting with the writing style and the themes, Bethany and Judith I think are going to be great people to look at for reviews. For me and my reading taste, it's been so interesting. I love all the ideas, but I'm having a hard time staying engaged because of the writing style, because it's both, and it feels like an older writing style, but it has a lot of modern sensibilities, and that dichotomy is a little weird, but it's also just kind of one of those things where it's hard for me to not lose my focus because my brain starts wandering. That said, Misery's a fascinating character. We have a character who doesn't believe she's the chosen one, but she's not a reluctant hero, and the snark and her kind of angel companion. There's a lot to like. There really is a lot to like. There's a lot of really fascinating ideas. It has a really interesting narrative framework. So I recommend trying it out if any of these things are buzzwords, to see if the writing style works for you, or if you think the writing style is worth working through, because that's where I'm kind of at, is like, I kind of want to. And also, if you are someone who likes kind of military base training, learning how to be a part of like a pilot team, that trope's in here. Been learning a lot about that right now, and it's been like really interesting. Rachel from the Shades of Orange does have a brief mention in one of her weekly wrap-ups. She really liked the gender representation, but felt that the world building was lacking for her tastes, but I will point you to that. And yeah, in general, there aren't that many reviews for this book out, which is kind of a shame, because I do think even if it's not necessarily my taste, it's doing some really cool thing in the space opera genre. But now pivoting back to something with a lot of ratings, it's a different type of space opera, I guess. I don't even know if it's actually space opera, but it's Nona the Ninth, which a lot of people who love the Locked Tomb series have been itching to get their hands on. And generally, most people have not hated this book. It's kind of, I can't quite tell in the fandom if people are liking it as much or less than the previous entries. It kind of goes back and forth when I look at reviews. But in general, it's not something where people are universally like, this was unnecessary, I don't like this. But I have been getting the sense that this is probably one of the more accessible entries in this quartet, where it is not as confusing. It's a little more grounded. It's a little easier to be connected to what is going on with our characters. And I think that's just going to maybe rub people the wrong way if part of what they love about the Locked Tomb series is how confusing and convoluted and puzzly it all is. If this is more accessible in a way that they don't enjoy and takes away the fun that they've had, I could see that. Tammy on her vlog was mentioning something that like has my ears perked about like potential like apocalyptic things. I know we're like kind of on a version of Earth. I still don't know if this is our universe or a different universe. I've only read Gideon the Ninth, and that was another thing, is I made sure to only watch spoiler-free reviews. But it does have me hopeful as someone who's like, okay, I read Gideon the Ninth, and it was good, but not perfect for me. Kind of like with Genesis and Misery, I was having like a writing style disconnect. It was difficult. But if by the end of this quartet's journey, all of the fans are like, oh my goodness, it stuck the landing, what like a great cathartic time, I think I'm going to pick up Gideon the Ninth again and go through. And the fact that this one seems to be more accessible, or people are feeling a tiny bit less confused, gives me hope. We shall see. In general, I have reviews from Daniel Green. There's a spoiler review if you want it from Tina at Sound and Fury. If you just want someone gushing about it, I have Piera Forde. She just like gushed and then has a spoiler other half of it that I didn't get to watch. So I think those are all of the things that I have. Another thing I'll mention is that it apparently does pick up right after Hair of the Ninth. I don't know where Hair of the Ninth ends, but it at least continues from there. I know in general I don't think people knew right away if Harrow took place right after Gideon or where, and having not read it, I don't have an answer to that question. Up next is another one that doesn't have too many reviews that I didn't think I was going to read, but I now am very curious about it, and that's Notorious Sorcerer. This one is one where I've had a bunch of people DNF it, be only okay with it. Some people have liked it, but then some people have loved it enough, and in their loving reviews, I'm like, maybe? And so this is kind of an alchemy multiverse world, and we have a character who I guess accidentally does something miraculous, and it changes his path in life. Basically, things that have perked my ears about this is that it's both fast-paced with involved world building, which can really work for me. I mean, yeah, just like being thrown in the deep end, which was brought up a couple times, is kind of one of my things. A lot of people did mention that it would have been nice if maybe there was a glossary, but if it's done to my taste, I do love picking up clues when I'm reading a work. And I didn't realize this was going to have that type of world building. A lot of people kind of talked about it like it was nothing special they had seen before when I first looked at it. Kind of like Rachel from Shades of Orange, she has a review of it for her tastes. This didn't work out, but sometimes our tastes don't align, which makes me even more hopeful. So, yeah, and then, a lot of people who did really like this really commented strongly on the well-realized character work, which is also a thing I really like. Like, everyone who really enjoyed this really brought up how, to them, the motivations of the characters and what they did felt really grounded and clear. And all of that makes me really curious. I generally trust Orbit as a publisher that puts out stuff that I'm interested in. If you want to see some reviews, some of the positive reviews that got me interested was RK Stumbling Bear, Andrew Rampton, and then Onyx Loki. Those people all liked to loved it. Judith and Rachel both have reviews where they were just fine with it, nothing too groundbreaking. And then Elliot Brooks DNF'd this book, but she really explains why she thinks it would work for other people, but just wasn't the book for her at that moment. And now we will pivot away from fantasy into a book that is very popular, but this is where you can see the divide between book reviews on YouTube and how popular a book is to the general public. And that is The Marriage Portrait, which has so many reviews, and it's generally, I think, doing pretty well, but I found 2 reviews on BookTube. And this is the author who wrote Hamnet, which was a book I really liked, which is why I was curious about reviews of this book, but there aren't that many to find. I will say that Gunpowder Fiction and Plot gave this a stellar 5-star review, thought it was even better than Hamnet, which they also gave 5 stars. So if you want to check that out, if you have similar tastes to them in terms of the literary sphere. And then there is a non-spoiler chat of it in a weekly update, and then I also put down below his spoiler rant on it. We have Supposedly Fun, who also loved Hamnet, but did not get on well with The Marriage Portrait. And it was hard for me to figure out the differences, and I think it came down to the character work. There's kind of 2 timelines. We have this character who gets married young and dies at a young age, and I think there's something to do with the portrait. I don't know the historical fiction part of this. In theory, it's an important person in history, and we are learning their untold tale. That's kind of the gist of what she does. And I think this is meant to be a very feminist tale. And we kind of have 2 timelines, one where she is younger and one after she is married and approaching her death. And I guess for one of the reviewers, Supposedly Fun, they felt too inconsistent for him, the change in personality or characterization, but that worked really well for Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. So I don't know, I think that's just a character connection thing, which is really subjective. If it's the same lyrical writing, I don't know, I feel like I would still have a great time, and I kind of want to keep an eye out for when I'm in the mood and want to get the audiobook. But this is one where people are reading it. It's a very popular general fiction book, but not really reviewing it on the internet. Another book where I could only find 2 reviews. This is the month where there are so many good books out, but no one's picking them up and reading them because I think we were all burnt out from August or something like that. But this is Silver Under Nightfall by Chupeco. This is an adult release by them. I don't know if it's their first adult release. I know they write a lot of upper range YA, but regardless, I have 2 reviews from this, a gushing review from Beth's Bookshelf, and I have a reading vlog from Books and Lala. And basically, if you want a campy, polyamorous, vampire detective horror book for the season, you might want to try this out. What I got is that Remy, our main character, who's a vampire hunter, who might be part vampire himself, is a very likable character. And I think, conceit of the story is that suddenly there is this virus that's negatively affecting vampires, and they're trying to figure out what's happening. And in the the process, he forms a relationship with this vampire couple. And apparently it's very fun. This has a lot of my like campy vampire buzzwords. I kind of am usually feeling stuff like this around this time of year. I wish it was a little shorter. I think it's about like 500 pages, and I think for this type of story, especially with like the detective portion of it, I'd prefer it to be shorter, just because sometimes a murder or a detective investigation plot arc isn't always enough motivation for me to get through a plot. But that said, if I loved Remy enough, if I liked the romantic relationship enough, that could be good. This definitely, I think, does have some like on-page sex stuff, so keep that in mind if that's a pro or con for you. I also heard that its comp to Castlevania was really good by Beth's Bookshelf, and that the action was fun to follow, and that it was a good time, which I did read the first couple pages in a bookstore, and I did vibe with the writing style. So this is definitely a book that if I don't get to this year, might be on my list to try out next year. And the cover is really pretty. That's just another thing. And now, quickly pivoting to another book that's pretty popular, but there is one review on BookTube, and that is Lost in Time, A.G. Riddle. My friend Michael Nipp reviewed this as one of his favorite like indie authors. It's doing very well, this book, in terms of number of people rating it and picking it up. But there's like no one talking about it on BookTube. And like, it's not that I only look at my corner of BookTube. I go to the search bar and I type in the book title name. Sometimes I'll then type review after it. Like, I try to find things. I don't know. But this is, I think, a good popcorn blockbuster sci-fi book that involves time travel. And yeah, let's see. It's a sci-fi thriller, time travel, multi-dimensional. And I think Michael Nipp was mixed on if it worked or not, but he had a fun time, and it's not like a grimdark view on humanity. So if, you know, the Blake Crouch release lets you down this year, maybe try this one out. All right, a book that has a lot of reviews, and I still don't know if I'll pick it up, but it's a standalone fantasy, so I wanted to put it on your radar, and that is Ruination. It's in the League of Legends universe, and there are quite a few reviews. We got Elliot Brooks, we have Holly Hart's books, and Tammy Tries to Read, and Rachel Terry. So, in general, no one thought this was like groundbreaking fantasy, but a lot of people thought it was a very cozy fantasy time with some slight subversions to what we're used to in certain tropes of like falling royal siblings, maneuvering political situations that are tense. I think there is like a MacGuffin quest portion to it. So if you're just like looking for something cozy that's only 400 pages in fantasy, that's standalone, everyone said you don't need to know League of Legends to read this, but if you do know League of Legends, it's kind of a prequel to that universe, so you can spoil yourself for this book. It's an origin story to some of the characters in the game. And so if you try to look up those characters to see art or stuff like that, be careful. I do actually know that the production of this book has art for the characters in the back. So you probably don't have to do that. But just like, it's kind of like when I was watching Arcane, I accidentally spoiled a major plot point by like just looking up a character, because I think similarly to Arcane, we are in the early stages of our character. They're not in their form that we know them as in the video game. So yeah, it has strong, independent, smart female lead, if that's something you like in your book. It's very plot driven. And if you also like there to be like at least nods to themes of mental health, it's there, but a lot of the themes are definitely more surface level than deep. It's meant to be a plot driven, cozy fantasy time. And I say cozy in like more of the nostalgia vein than I do like Legends and Lattes, I guess I would say. So yeah, if you want to know more, just check out those reviews down below. And now we're getting into a book that I definitely need to pick up, because the reviews for this are so passionate, and it's really, I think I'm going to have such a fun time, and that's the Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. First and foremost, the review I have to point you to is Audrey at Perpetual Pages. Audrey screams from the rooftops about how everyone needs to read Cemetery Boys, and now this book, and this is no different. Also, Literary Princess had a great review with a great character breakdown, because I think a positive thing is that the way it handles the large cast of characters is done well. Everyone is distinct. But maybe a potential negative is that there's a large cast of characters. So this is kind of a battle royale story where we have these demigod children that are all inspired by different Mexican heritage, I think. It's definitely its own thing. It's not like based off Aztec or Mayan gods or anything like that, but it's inspired by Latina culture. And so we have these demigods, these children, and someone has to be sacrificed every year, and that has to do with going through these trials. And so there's a bunch of teens who all have to work together, I think, to accomplish these trials. Everyone was very vague about the nature of the trials. But at the end of the day, someone's going to have to be sacrificed and killed, and I think you can be killed during the trials. So that's partially why we have a large cast of characters. But also, a thing that's really cool about the world building, other than it being like a unique pantheon, which is just always very fun, which is I think why it gets like the Percy Jackson like rep or comp to it, but that there's a lot of good representation in these deities. I think there's a deaf character, like it basically celebrates your differences. We have plenty of on-page trans characters. One of our characters takes testosterone. Like, it has a lot of great representation, and it seems like our main character is just like someone you want to like wrap in bubble and protect at all costs, because essentially normally only people of a higher class of demigod get to make it into the Sunbearer trials, and of course our main character, who is not a part of that, suddenly, you know, gets put into these trials when he was never expecting to have to deal with this. So I don't know, there's just a lot of things people said, like, and also so Audrey, because they're always so eloquent. And so I really think you should check out their like 5 reasons you should read this book video, because I'm not going to be doing it justice. But there's apparently like really good themes on collectivism versus like competitivism, which is like things that I like eat up, because we truly are, especially in Western education, so competitive all the time. You have to beat the person next to you or you will not survive. And there's a lot of bucking that, especially with this battle royale of like, well, maybe we should just all do what's best for us together, collectively, leaning on each other. I really love that. So yeah, it seems to blend a very good, like, good community humor tone with a serious intention. The few negative things that I saw for this is pacing inconsistencies. I think some people thought the beginning was too slow and the end was too fast. And I think that's just going to vary depending on who you are as a reader. Chances are that's probably how it'll work for me, because that's typically how I feel about almost any book I ever read, is that sometimes I think this beginning is like a little too slow in its setup, and at the ending I'm like, I blinked and I missed it. That happens to me all the time. But this is a young adult release that's like really, really, really high on my radar. Next up, we have a horror release. It's like a gothic sci-fi horror blend from Tor. I'm very interested in this one. This one is apparently there are these parasites that kind of exist in humans and they become doctors. I don't know, there's this weird thing going on there. And apparently one of the parasites humans have died, and the new stand-in is trying to figure out why. And that premise in itself just sounds weird and creepy and kind of cool. Whimsy Dearest really like this, kind of compared it to the movie The Thing, which is also a great movie, and like it's gothic steampunk vibe, and I think for her might be a potential favorite of the year, which is high praise. Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany had a whole vlog of like horror releases and thought it was really smart. It did have body horror and there are content warnings, like a lot of horror you might want to check out. And Rachel from the Shades of Orange was nervous about this because gothic is not normally her subgenre of horror. It can be a little too character focused or slow paced for her, but found this to be really interesting and different. And I think part of that is the genre blendiness of like this gothic horror and sci-fi and stuff like that. So I don't know a lot, because a lot of times when people review horror, we talk more about vibes than specific plot points because we don't want to like spoil things, and that's definitely what's happened here, but I'm very interested in it. It just sounds so, like the world building sounds so cool. I think that's my hook right now. Another gothic horror we can talk about is The House of Hunger. This is the same author who wrote The Year of the Witching, and there's a wide range of opinions on this. In general, most people are like 4-star experiencing it, like having a pretty good time, and I think a lot of the mixed feelings are on the ending. This is a world where there's not really vampires, but there is a consumption of blood. So there is this hunger, this thirst for the vitality of young blood. And our main character chooses to go to this house to give her blood so she can like make a living for reasons I don't really know. People have definitely talked about it in their reviews. But then she gets the interest of one of the major people there. So there's like, I don't know. Some people say romance, some people say it's not a romance, but there is that type of tension between these two characters. And tension was a word that was brought up a lot. There's just this building of dread. And I think the payoff of that building is what makes or breaks the experience for people, because I think some people really put a lot on what was the payoff going to be and were not satisfied, and other people were content with just the building, and even if the payoff wasn't 100% for them, just was really enjoying the thematic discussions and things like that. And that was another thing I noticed. The people who really loved this book talked a lot about the themes of classism, of hunger, of exploitation. And the people who didn't really vibe with it, I don't think connected with those things, which is fine. That's just like kind of, a book reading experience. So I think this is one of those things where if you are in the right headspace, or if she approaches the execution of these themes like the perfect way for you, you're gonna have a great time with this relatively short book. I actually found out in Bookish Melody's review, which you really should check out her channel. I'm like legitimately shocked she has less than 1,000 subscribers, because her reviews are always so well thought out and like very eloquent. But when she was talking about it, it's less than 300 pages. So it's like, for me, that's like the appropriate amount of space for this type of like gothic, meandering kind of dreadful experience. So that actually makes me more interested in picking it up, because also for such a short book, even if I don't love the ending, like it wasn't that long of a time, People who liked The Year of the Witching generally liked this similarly. Some people liked it way more. Some people liked it a tiny bit less, but in general, like, it wasn't a huge step down. And very few people, like, said it was like a huge step up. It was more just like, they liked the vampire exploration more than the dark witchiness. I also heard a lot of things like, it's definitely like got some of that campy, opulent aesthetics that we associate with vampire things, even if it's not vampire. And so if that type of vibe and aesthetic is not really for you, that's definitely going to be in here. Like, it is gothic, but it's also, kind of over the top in its descriptions, like you kind of expect from a vampire story most of the time. And now switching to a book where I can only find 2 reviews, and I was sad because I wanted more reviews because I want to know. And I think I'm leaning towards wanting to pick this up based off the 2 that I have seen, and that's Thistlefood. This is kind of like Baba Yaga house inspired. Okay, it's like, so essentially what it's about is we have 2 estranged siblings, and they find out that they have an inheritance and from another family of the Yaga family, and they get the house with the chicken feet. And it's about them traveling to America and their relationship with their inherited magic and this house and the power of storytelling and generational trauma, and the story of Baba Yaga and how it always pivots and morphs into what it needs to be for the story she is plopped into, which I love a lot of those themes. The sister main character kind of does carpentry because she can accidentally or on purpose bring things to life, but has like kind of a traumatic relationship with that magic. Her brother's a con artist and a showman, and he can mimic things, and he wants to take this house on the road to do their puppet show. And on the way, there's like this villainous creature, this long shadow man or something, and he can affect people around them. And a lot of those elements feel fun. It feels good and fun, but also potentially thematically rich. And apparently this author's a poet, and I've had very good luck with reading works by poets. So it apparently has very lyrical, quotable writing, and if it works for me, I think it will. And also Thistlefoot, the house, is kind of a character, which, yes. So I don't know if I'm actually going in with the right expectations, but I need to at least try a couple pages of it next time I'm at the bookstore. That's where I'm at with these reviews, because Caffeinated Bookworm, like, had a glowing review of this, like, wants to buy it for everyone in their family, and, like, described it as heartbreaking and an intense experience at about, like, the 80% mark or something like that. Like, she was just going along for the journey and then, like, got unexpectedly gut punched, which was also something that Steph said in their like 3-minute review, which was also a very well crafted 3-minute review. To be able to say so much in 3 minutes, I only know how to ramble, as you can tell, as we are this long into this video. But the last book I will talk about is Motherthing, which I thought came out in October, but I think it came out in September, and I'd seen a lot of people in my feed reviewing it, so I thought I would put it here, especially because it's kind of a weird dark comedy horror-ish book. And I have 3 reviews with 3 different ratings. We have Tina from Sound and Fury with a 3-star review. We have Thomas from SFF 180 with a 4-star review. And then we have All I Do Is Read with a vlog of a 5-star review. So we definitely have a good range of things, and it definitely seemed like what made this book work or not work was actually just thematic connection, because everyone agreed that it was really well written. They really liked the weird dark comedy approach to things, but there were just some things about motherhood and the relationships to mothers and how that can change us, affect us as people, that felt either a little too on the nose for some readers or weren't executed the way that they wanted it to, whereas other people I like really connected to what was on page. But also there's this main character, and she's kind of going through it, and there's definitely this kind of like fever dream aspect of what's real, what's not real, what is reality in this book. And I think for Tina, she was a very annoying and naive character at times and wasn't always consistent in her interactions with the world of, like, at the age we were necessarily given for her. Whereas that was not a complaint for, I think, Thomas or Allie. But yeah, you can definitely just go check out those reviews. I don't know if I'll read it, although, so in Allie's video, she was comparing it to a lot of books that have either been on my radar or have been books I've liked, like The Echo Wife. So I would check out her video because she compares it to a bunch of stuff, but she gives reasons why she's comparing it to those things. So it's not like a direct, like, if you like this, like that. It's just more like she picked up Motherthing hoping it would be the vibe of a bunch of books she really likes. And it was that, but it also had this like special factor for her. So yeah, also this cover's like really cool. I think everyone agreed that this cover's like pretty great. So yeah, that's this month. There's a lot of really interesting books that came out in September, and I'm very interested in a lot of them. Don't know when I'm going to get to any of them, but I'm intrigued. I'm truly intrigued. What are releases you read in September that I missed talking about that you really liked? What is on your radar for October? And if you just want to leave an emoji, leave a chicken for like Thistlefood, because I think it's chicken legs, right? If I'm wrong, I truly apologize. It's been a long time since I've read a story about Baba Yaga. But like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.